Dinesh, right? DK was coming back, and the office bearers of FISME, and ladies and gentlemen. The country's agenda is inclusive growth. It's the subject and the theme of the 11th plan, of which we have just completed the midterm appraisal, and the National Development Council will meet this Saturday to accept or adopt or criticize our appraisal of our progress with respect to inclusive growth. Inclusion in growth, real inclusion in growth, self-respecting inclusion in growth comes about when people earn their own incomes. Inclusion in growth is not made by giving people handouts, but by people earning for themselves. So jobs, jobs, jobs. We have heard said this morning, the resource that we have in the young population of this country, the largest pool of young people anywhere on earth now. That pool can be an asset, will see themselves as assets if they have jobs. We need to produce an additional 12 million jobs per year in the next 10 years and more. Estimates indicate that the formal sector was producing in the years 1999 to 2007, before the recession, years in which our economy was growing at 8 to 9%, it was producing 2 million additional jobs per year. So you see the gap. 12 million required, the formal economy, 2 million jobs per year, at 8 and 9% growth. So as the minister said, the point is not to have 10% growth with few jobs being generated. We must have more jobs generated, whatever be the growth. So we have options here. We can talk about 10% growth with the same rate of job generation that we've got. We can talk about another pattern of 8% maybe, but with many more jobs being generated. Or perhaps, why not 10% with many more jobs being generated? And that has to be our ambition, and that's what we're considering as we go forward towards the industrialists who lead those corporations. That could be the shine of the country that the world sees. But no, if we have 1 million and several million fireflies, smaller enterprises strong with light, that can also produce shine in this country, a more inclusive shine, and that's the country that we wish to have. The Prime Minister's task force referred to already focused on this sector, the MSME sector, to strengthen it so that we could have the growth with the shine in the million that I just mentioned. What the task force has come out with, which is being implemented, as Mr. Dinesh mentioned, I shall not repeat. So I want to focus on what the Planning Commission and myself, as a member of the task force, is focused on. We are told that the Planning Commission should focus on implementation and not more schemes. Right? We have here, how many? 141 schemes already. We have in this country many schemes, not just for your sector, but for the social sector too. And the complaint is, they don't work, or they don't work efficiently. So we have to concentrate on the implementation of the formulation of more schemes. How shall we do this? And the second thing we must concentrate on is the caliber of our institution to produce change and to produce results. So myself and the Planning Commission have associated with the task force that has followed through and connected with two things. One with implementation, one with institution. Implementation, credit flow. Why is it that when we've had targets and amounts set aside of credit for the MSME sector, it didn't go through? And so now, the MSME sector demands that you have higher amounts and larger quotas for them. But the question should be asked, if in the hopper we already had this much, and it didn't go through the pipes, to the people who needed it, then just putting more and putting bigger quotas, is that the most efficient way? Yes, forcing more through from the top through clogged pipes will perhaps produce a further trickle through, but can't we improve the flow through the pipes? So in the implementation, the credit side, we've got the announcements of the higher quotas, and 60% as you mentioned within that. but why is it not growing? So working along with the banks and the financial sector in unclogging the pipes, right down to the smaller sector. And there we come to something that's been mentioned already, that the last bit requires capillary. The same pipes can't reach the last bit. So to create an institutional setup in which those capillaries are also created from the formal banking sector or the large banks towards the micro enterprises that need credit. That's what the implementation of the credit side of the Prime Minister's task force is all about. And I'm leading a group along with the representatives of the banks and financial institutions to make that happen. The other is transaction costs, mentioned already, which is part of the pipes and the implementation. But they arise because of, as I said, the plethora of institutions and the frictions between them and lack of clarity amongst them of what is to be done. I have joined the government a year ago, and last week I was lucky that finally I was allotted a government house. It's a very prized asset to have here in Delhi, and I got one. So I'm very keen to move in. But as I went there, the PWD pointed out to me that now that the house was vacant, and it is precious government property, they would like to update the electrical systems. They said these systems were installed from 60 years ago. They have been patched up all these years. Times have changed since they were designed and installed. Now people have more air conditioners, they have computers which require voltage stability. We need to refurbish the electrical systems before you can move in. And so it happens with institutions. They're set up at a certain time, times change, the institutions keep getting patched up, and times come then to look at refurbishing our institutional structure. So the second group that I'm leading following the Prime Minister's task force is looking at all the institutions that have been created that are there to help serve the MSME sector. The NSIC, SIDBI, the District Development Commissioners, and so on. Can we tune that up, that institutional structure, to update it to better serve the requirements of customers, the MSME sector today? So those are two main thrusts that we are undertaking from government to change the system, to improve the system, to reform the system, to produce results for the MSME sector, and thereby more jobs and better, more inclusive growth for the country. Now I'm going to come to yourselves, the strategies for the MSME sector within itself. Strategies must always actually, but I was going to say as far as possible, but I would say always be consonant with who you are and what your capabilities are. China is a country with thousands of years of history of the one big emperor and a wall around to prevent others from coming in. That's not India. India has always been diverse with a multiplicity of kingdoms and kings, contending, moving, and people coming in from the outside also. And that fluidity, combination has produced this country with such great diversity, so much diversity and variety that we call it incredible India. That is us. So our strategy cannot be the same as China's. They're different countries. The National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council has commissioned a study by the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, on our industrial sector to find out what were the characteristics of our industry, what was succeeding, and what was perhaps not so successful. And what they noted was that the strengths of Indian companies, the ones that were succeeding in the small sector and the medium, as well as the few in the large sector, was based on their flexibility, on the variety of products that they were able to tool up, produce and offer, their ability to tool up. The strategy was small volumes with high variety within them, economies of scope. It's not the same as the strategy of scale, and the scale resulting in low price. But these were strategies for getting more revenues, perhaps at higher margins, and thus producing profit. Not necessarily only by low price. China has the low prices. It is, as I mentioned to you, a country run on with a different rhythm. we have to be dancing to our rhythm and our strengths, and that will be strategies based on our ability to be flexible, innovative, to produce variety,